This land and the history around this land is intergenerational, starting not just with my grandmother, but also with her mother. She acquired the land like anyone else would by saving money, working hard, and steady adding on to the property. When she was growing up here, she would go to school in the morning. Well, they're up at 4 o'clock. They had to make a 35-minute drive to school to be there on time for her to attend, as well as for my grandmother to teach. And at that time, this was pretty much a full working farm. So you had goats, cows, chickens, horses. All of that had to be tended to before you ever got to school that morning. Coming here is coming home, even though I grew up in Houston. My name is Dr. Rolonda Teal. We are currently in the home of my grandmother, Sybil Woods, here in Converse, Louisiana. And I'm honored to be here in the home of my grandmother because my foundation for my love of being in the wilderness, outdoors, communing with nature really began here. But we would come here all the time in the summers. There was a lot of sacrifice that went into this land, which is why myself, a few other relatives are, determined to keep this legacy alive and to make it be everything that we think that it can become. My grandmother taught me a lot about what it takes to survive on this land. She used to do the preserving, the fruits and all, everything that grew around here. Her motto was, everything is reusable and you find a use for it. Composting, that's like a new term. That was something she did before it was called composting, Everything had a purpose and then it was repurposed. And if it could be, it was repurposed again. So that's how we kind of grew up knowing not to be wasteful, not to just take things for granted either, that everything had to be worked for. One of the things about being in really rural areas, sometimes the power go out. There's a joke around here, a bird can just land on the power line and it can be enough to knock the power out. And so it becomes really critical then at those times to have some source of backup. And that's really kind of how Blue Eddy came into my life, is that we had a storm here, an ice storm a couple of years ago. And really, we were stuck for days with no power. And it was because of Blue Eddy. I was able to kind of make it. And I used it primarily just to run the television at night for a couple of hours to keep up with what was going on, to keep my phones charged, and, little minor things like that is what it was basically used for. And then I realized, hey, I can use it for other things as well. And so by me doing online classes, I find myself sometimes in places where I can just set up like a makeshift office and use the Blue Eddy to power my laptop and all for the day. Currently, I teach at Houston Community College, anthropology and introduction to archaeology. And I've been able to actually use some of that training to help document this place and the history associated with it. Then I switched a little bit and went into forestry for my PhD because look around. I'm surrounded by the woods and forests. And one of the goals, I really went into it because I wanted to be able to help some of the Black people who still own land around here be able to maintain that land. Perhaps they will put up, pine forests or something like that where they could generate some wealth instead of steady losing the land like many of the people around here are doing. Before I even turned 18, I joined the Army, so I had to get permission from my mother to join. Now, of course, the military camping was nothing fun about it. It was, we're out there, it might be very cold, very hot or whatever. But I started taking those skills that I had and trying to introduce it to other Black people who had never gone camping. I want to be able to reintroduce Black people to the land, to nature. There is nothing in the world to me like waking up here and you step outside and you smell the fresh air. You know it's country air. You know that right away. Waking up in the morning. Yeah, I hear the birds in the city, but the song is sweeter in the country. That's how it feels to me. So there's just something about being here that I felt if it can do this for me, then what can it do for others? The first group I ever took, I went to a park here in Louisiana, and I'll never forget one of the guys that was there with me. He stood and he just kind of looked out, and this is the kind of stuff you only see on TV. So for him to have that experience and then to have it with me is something I'll never forget, and he has since passed. So that's something way that I will always remember him is we went camping together. He had his first camping experience with me, and how he was just awed and amazed to see something that he had only seen on television. What I'm trying to do now are find ways to bring us back really to our roots. And I started trying to figure out how to not be stuck in the house working all the time. And I realized that I could go out and sit and work at the beach. But I needed some backup in order to be able to do that. And so with Blue Eddy, I could go out, put my little beach tent thing out there, have my table, I have me a little small mini cooler, and I would have my little drinks and my little lunch stuff. Blue Eddy has revolutionized, if you will, the ability to be able to work without being confined to a house or an office building or something like that. I can go to a park and work all day because I know I have that backup if something goes out.